Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I am here with the Simon Says Stamp April kit. I decided to start subscribing to the kit. I had previously subscribed to the Hero Arts kit, and then my subscription was canceled, and I don't remember canceling it, but then it was sold out, and I was like, let me just try a different kit since I wasn't really digging what Hero Arts was doing with their kits, although they are like a huge value. So I'm going to do the Simon kit for this month. And I like those little tiny action wobblers. They're super fun. The stamp set is adorable. I can see myself using it a bunch of times since I love critters. They included some tags and then this Lawn Fawn plaid paper, which I love. I actually already had bought the paper pad. You don't get a full other copy of the paper pad. You just get part of a paper pad. I think it's about half. I'm not quite sure. They do tell you in the product description. However, this kit is sold out. You can buy all the individual elements separately. It's definitely a better value as a kit. And then here are the 2 pieces of colored cardstock and then 2 pieces of white cardstock. Honestly, wasn't particularly interested in the cardstock. I don't use a ton of colored cardstock. I was a little bit interested in trying the Nina 80 pound that it comes with. However, it's really thin, and I don't think I would really recommend it for Copic coloring. I don't really think anyone does. Just mentioning that. And it also came with these mini ink cubes. And I thought that this particular kit was a great value because if you think about the stamp set plus the mini ink cubes, you're already at $26. And the kit cost $25 for a subscriber. So it was definitely worth the value. It wasn't as good of a value as the Hero Arts kits, which include like a ton of dies. But that kit is also a little bit more expensive. And I don't think you could make cards with just the kit. Whereas here with the Simon kit, the only thing I'm going to add is coloring mediums and black ink and like adhesive kind of stuff. But you know, I'm not like, I don't have to go get some pattern paper to go with it or card bases because I chose not to use all of the cardstock in the kit as card bases. I don't know, I just think that you need a lot less extra supply. So if you're the kind of person who likes to get like a complete package, I think that this particular kit might be a little more well suited to that kind of card making. So I'm starting by trying to stamp some of the tags, and I'm using my MISTI because I want to stamp like a whole bunch of the tags at one time without having to reposition everything, and because there's 5 of the white and 5 of the craft. However, these white-ish tags are really slick. So I don't even know how I would really color with them. It wouldn't really work with Copics. They wouldn't blend right on it. You could try colored pencil, maybe zig markers, but I don't really think watercolor would work well on a slick surface. So I was kind of like, I don't really know how I'd color those anyway, so let me just focus on the craft tags to begin with. So here I stamped the elephant on the craft tags. And what I decided to do is I took the solid hearts from the stamp set and I stamped those in a different color each time along the bottom. So I paired the elephant with pink hearts, and then I don't remember which one was which, but like the giraffe has green or the penguin has orange or whatever it is. So I used the 4 different colors of ink. There's a green, pink, yellow, and orange ink. And I just kind of use that to add a touch of color to the tag. I'm going to show you one animal with colored pencil coloring and one animal with Copic coloring because I colored an animal for every single card, and for the most part, except for the very last card. And if I tried to show you the coloring of every single animal, this would just take forever, and it would be super boring. Unless you really like coloring videos, but like I'm not a great colorist, so I think that there would be other people to watch for that, like Sandy Allnock would be like amazing, or Kathy Rakusin. Anyway, here I am with the colored pencils, and I'm using the cool grays for the elephant in my Prismacolor pencils. I'm going to use cool grays in the markers as well, and I think that that lends itself well to an elephant, but really whatever grays you have are fine. What I like about coloring on the craft cardstock is how you can see some of these lighter colors. I like the really light gray here. I think actually pops more, and I really love the look of colored pencils on craft cardstock. I wouldn't recommend Copics for these tags because they are so thin. I think it would be hard to blend, and I think it would use a lot of ink, but you could certainly go for it. They're just really thin craft tags. So, you know, colored pencils are my recommendation if you have the kit and are looking for some ideas. And I'm coloring starting either way, light or dark, it doesn't really matter. what mostly matters with colored pencils is having a sharp point and going lighter than like sometimes you want to color really dark to fill in the space, but I found that if you take longer but color with lighter pressure, you get better blending. The harder you press, the less blended it looks, in my personal opinion. So my biggest recommendation is keep your pencil sharp so you can get into tight areas, and to, lightly layer the pencils on top of each other. I'm adding shadows in a drop shadow sort of way. Like there would be shadows where his head meets his body because his head would be casting a shadow. Or where his head meets his ears, so there's a darker pink there because his head is casting a shadow on his ears. But I don't want to focus too much on the coloring on this video because I'm more trying to share some ideas of how to use the kit. And I like that these sentiments in the kit have the open spaces so that you can add more pops of color. This is a sort of rainbow-inspired kit, and so I'm trying to pull in a bunch of different colors in my tags, like coloring. When I did the green hearts, I chose to color in green writing, but sometimes I also chose contrasting colors, like there's orange hearts, so I did blue writing because they're opposite on the color wheel, so they're a nice contrast. And that's a good, if you're not quite sure how to do colors, sometimes if you want like two colors to pop, do contrasting. If you want the colors just to look good next to each other, choose two colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. Hopefully that's a helpful tip for some of you. I really wanted to use the rainbow papers because there was a decent amount of color going on in the tags. And I also thought, when I looked at this kit, I looked at it as like a rainbow fun kid, like bright, loved it. Love this kit. But I loved that rainbow aspect of it. So I wanted to make sure that all my cards were super colorful. And I like that when you finish with these cards, they could really go to like anyone. It doesn't really matter the age. It's not too little kiddish. It's not too feminine or too masculine or anything like that. It's just like perfect for anyone. And that's great for me because I donate a lot of my cards. And I try to always mention that in the video description. If I forget, let me know. But I'll share at least one place that I donate them to. And I will also put that in my blog post where I'll share a picture of every single card when it's done. But here basically I have the 5 craft tags colored. All the animals are colored in. And I want to add, I don't want to just put the tag on the pattern paper. I want to add a little something behind each one of them. So I've just kind of like taken chunks of the pattern paper. So I cut them down to standard A2 size. This case 4 by 5 1/4, so there's like a 1/4 inch border around the standard A2 size card. And since I knew that I'd be making a lot of A2 size cards, I cut the green and blue paper also to A2 size card bases and kind of like put them to the side for a while and took that extra 2-inch strip, because these are 6 by 6 papers, that extra 2-inch strip to cause a little like just something off to the left to layer the tag on. So sometimes I layered the tag on a small rectangle, sometimes on a long skinny rectangle. I just kind of like played with the patterns. And as you can see here, it really is a lot of just like put the 2 papers next to each other, move the animal around onto each of the different color combos, and see what you like best. I wanted to add just a touch of dimension to this because they're really simple cards. I think that that's overall good for my purpose, but just to make them a little more special, I decided to add some foam to pop up the tags. And so here I just took a piece of fun foam, and this is like dollar store super cheap fun foam, and used my Scotch ATG gun to adhere it to the tag and then adhere the foamed tag to the card base. I do recommend pressing pretty firmly to really make sure that adhesive sticks, because foam doesn't bind with all adhesives. Like not all liquid glues are successful with foam, for instance. So if you're having a little bit of trouble, you might want to try a dry tape runner like I'm using here. And also just apply some extra pressure and really make sure that it sticks. Or use, a specific like foam glue. And I usually take these strips and glue them to the pattern paper, then turn it over and then trim off that edge, rather than trying to make sure my measurements are exact before I glue it down. Because a lot of times then I'll find that it's just a little short or just a little long or whatever, and it's not worth fussing with, because then I wind up cutting twice because I have to glue it down, realize that it's off, and then try to trim it up to make it not look off, and it's easier for me to just glue that strip down and trim it off the edge and save that little bit because that can be used for like sentiments and stuff later on. So I was trying to figure out how I was going to use this solid cardstock, which like sounds absurd because solid cardstock shouldn't be hard to use. You could use it for a card base or a layer on the card and no problem. But I was like, I only have one sheet of it. So I wanted to perhaps like make it a little bit more prominent or something. But then these critters are so like clearly for coloring. There's no dyes in the kit. And of course I could combine some of the dyes that I personally have with the kit. I did actually place a little bit of an extra order at Simon when I ordered the kit, which was nice because like the first month you can get the extra stuff shipped all at once. But anyway, so I got that Simon Says stamp, intense black ink, which I've been using on this video because it's great for watercolor, colored pencil, Copic, everything, and it really is a darker black because I stamped it. I did like little swatches of the 4 ink colors from the kit as well as the Simon Says Intense Black since I ordered them all at the same time, and I will say it is actually blacker than some of the other black inks like Memento and even My Favorite Things, which I think is blacker than Memento. It's even blacker. And it works with, like I said, watercolor and Copics. So it's pretty versatile ink. Did I need another black ink? No. Was I really curious because everyone brags about how amazing it is? Yes. And so that's why, since I was ordering anyway, I got it. But I don't think it's necessary by any means. But it is definitely a nice crisp black ink. So here I lined up some of the critters, and you could see that it like took me forever to figure out how I wanted to place them. And I wanted to keep that in just because I wanted to show that like a lot of crafting can just be, like I just said, like playing with the different papers on top of each other. It can be moving the stamps around on your page to get an idea of how it will look before you stamp things down. So I'm a big fan of that, and that's why I like clear stamps, because you can see through them, lay them all across, and kind of like build your scene before you stamp it down, get an idea how everything is going to look. And so again, just wanted to kind of show you that process. And I'm just like I made 5 of the tag cards because there was 5 tags. I thought, well, let me make a few of this kind of card as well. And so I'm going to make 3 of this, 1 for each of the animals, because in this case I'm just going to color 1 animal per card and leave the other 2 patterned. And we'll see what I mean in a minute. But right here I want to talk about the coloring just a little bit. With the Copic coloring, I generally find that it's easier to lay down a base coat. I think that things blend better, so I kind of like lay down an overall coat of my lightest color and then go from dark to lightest. I think it kind of just like depends on how it works for you in terms of what you find, because I was finding this paper was getting oversaturated. This is not the Nina that comes in the kit. The Nina that comes in the kit is very thin, in my opinion. So I'm using Recollections 110-pound cardstock, which is what I use for all my card bases as well. It's a pretty thick cardstock, great for many purposes, gives your card some like weight, which I really like. But even with that, my C7 marker is like crazy juicy and wet for some reason, and so I was having a little bit of trouble with blending, but I think again that was just my marker. However, as you saw, there was like that overall light gray coat. Then I went into the darkest, which is a C7, blended it out with the C5, blended it out even more with the C3. To keep your light areas as light as possible, I recommend not going over the lightest area with your light marker the first time, but to leave that white, and then when you blend it out, pull that light color into it. When you're working in a really small area, that can be a bit tricky, but just something to try if you feel like your light colors are getting too dark and you're not getting enough contrast. Also with coloring the ear, I use the RV0, like 000 and RV00, I believe. I tried to put some of the caps out, but I just kind of did a simple blending out. I used the same exact drop shadows that I used on the other elephant. And you can see that both ways use a lot of the same skills, in terms of the shadowing and blending. And so it's just kind of like a matter of personal preference. I personally like to have a bunch of different choices for coloring. Sometimes I like to watercolor, and sometimes I like to Copic color. So now I wanted to add a sentiment strip across all three of these cards. So then I just picked some of the scraps that I have been creating, and I'm going to stamp the Wild About You sentiment on them. I found that the sentiment strips were like almost too small for the Wild About You, but I wanted to use my scraps rather than cutting down a whole new piece of paper, so I kind of just went with it. And even though, like I said, this Simon Says stamp Intense Black ink is really black, I still felt like I wanted to stamp it twice with my Misty to get a perfect and dark impression. I find that that's true with all black inks. Like now that I've spoiled and have a Misty or any stamp positioner that you have, I like it to be really crisp black, and so I always wind up stamping everything 2 or 3 times. So I'm adding this strip across. Like I mentioned before, I find it easier to put the whole strip and then trim rather than trimming beforehand. My idea with this set of cards is to put one of the animals on these little mini wobbles and then leave the other 2 animals like patterned or solid for the purple one. And I actually wasn't really sure how you're supposed to like attach these wobbles to make them line up essentially. And it occurs to me that like I probably shouldn't have stamped the image underneath it, because when I tried to adhere these down, I found that once they like started wobbling, they weren't lined up right. He's like crooked. But it's such a fun card. There's such a fun like little interactive element to the cards that I thought, the person who receives this card probably isn't going to like be super upset that it's a little bit off, and so I just kind of went with it. But if you have any tips for how to make your action wobbler line up with the stamped image behind it, please leave those in the video description for me, because I do think these action wobblers are fun. I don't use a lot of them, but I definitely welcome anybody's suggestions. And then again, I colored with a Copic marker the sentiment, because I thought that it would make it pop a little bit more, and they had that open space in the sentiments. So there's 3 of those cards. There's one with a giraffe, and there's one with the elephant as well. I didn't show you attaching them, because I didn't know how to attach them very well anyway, so I really wasn't offering good suggestions. And turns out the giraffe is a little bit too small for the action wobblers. So that was kind of a bummer, and something to keep in mind. It's hard to hide the action wobbler behind the giraffe. So here I am kind of trying to be inspired by that. At the beginning of the video, I don't know if you saw, but there's like a printout that comes with the kit that has some card ideas on it. And I saw that they did these colored strips with the ink. And I was like, I want to kind of slightly change it, but be pretty heavily inspired by that card. So I just want to point out, like, I know that there's, another card at the beginning that was like that. And so I am not, trying to take credit for the idea per se. So basically I'm just swiping these ink cubes across the white cardstock, and I am using the Nina that came with the kit because I think it's fine for backgrounds like this. I wouldn't really ink blend on it. I wouldn't color on it, but for something like this, if I was just doing straight stamping or straight ink, I think that it's fine. So I have the swiped ink swashes, and my tip for those is to start in the center and pull out to each side, because if you start from one side and go to the other, then one side will be more clean and the other side will be more rough. Like you see there's these little like fades out on each side, and if you start on one side and pull out to the other, you'll get a clean edge on one side, and I want them both to be a little bit messy. Also, you'll want to go slow and do it a couple of times to get the most coverage. If you just do it once, it might appear really uneven, and these inks do even out over time. So even though initially it might look a little bit splotchy, do have some faith, give it some time, and they will even out a bit, but I still recommend a couple of layers. And I am going to stamp a critter and a sentiment on there, but I'm going to cover them all with more Copic colored critters. However, this time I'm not going to bother to color in the sentiment because it's kind of going to get that ink color from underneath. There, you see that I like dragged my orange too far and kind of got it messed up. Not a big deal, because there's always another side to the cardstock. And sometimes that doesn't work. Like with your Copic coloring, the back side gets messed up, as you can see on the elephant there. But in this case, I could just turn it over. So always think about that before you toss the cardstock. See if you could just turn it over and start again so that you waste a little bit less materials. But I did one for each of the animals in the stamp set, just because I thought it was such a fun card. And so here I thought, I'm done. At this point, I have made 12 cards. My goal was 10 cards for the kit. I would still use the supplies in the kit more than that, but I wanted to at least make 10 cards when I got the kit. And so here's what I came up with, and I came up with 12 cards, a lot of duplicates in a way. But then I had one last idea. Honestly, at this point, the reason I stopped was partly because I was tired of coloring the critters. I don't know if that sounds bad, but like, I colored a lot of them, and like at that point I was a little bit bored with the stamp set. I didn't want to just keep coloring the same elephant, etc., etc. So I wanted to think of like a different way to use the critter stamps. So what I did here was I thought, well, what about stamping with the back side of the critters? Because I noticed that these critters are, for the most part, symmetrical. They're even on both sides. They're not like in a pose where one arm is up or something like that. So I thought, well, if I turn them over, I can get a solid stamped image with the back of the critters, and then turn them back right side up and stamp the outline over the solid piece. And that will create like a really bright, fun card, and it will be another way to use the ink, because I can use the ink to make these really bright, fun critters. You may notice that I'm a big fan of the Misty. I use it a lot, but I also went for the Misty Creative Corners. I wasn't quite sure like why you needed them at first, because you could use washi tape. Definitely. Like right now, instead of putting that Misty corner there, I could be taking tape and I could be gluing it, like not gluing it, but like taping it down to the spot in my Misty. But I thought I was going to stamp a couple of these, and I was like, well, if I do that, then I won't be able to position exactly in the same place unless I count the number down and across with the grid, which is totally fine. You could do that. But also, I have found that sometimes using the tape, I still get shifting. And I wanted it to be, I knew it was going to take a while. And I knew that I was going to have to stamp it more than once. And if I keep shifting around, that I was going to get a little bit frustrated. So I thought that the Misty Corner was a great solution. It allows you to overstamp. Like I couldn't put this in the corner of the Misty because the giraffe hangs off of it, or the penguin hangs off of it, and so does the elephant, etc., etc. So I think the Misty Corners are pretty useful. But if they're not in your budget, washi tape will stick it down. And then if you wanted to stamp multiples, you could just kind of count from the top and corner, because there are the rulers and the grid paper and everything underneath it. So they're not necessary by any means, but they are pretty useful. And I'm going to stamp this like a few times, and the giraffe is turning out great. And that's because the giraffe is mostly solid on the front. Like he has a lot of details on him, and so there's no like big gap kind of space. And so he stamps fine, but then like the penguin, his belly area has nothing really supporting it when you turn the stamp over, and so he was a little bit harder to stamp. Or the elephant has like the big spots in his ears, etc., etc. So they don't stamp perfectly because they're not meant to stamp that way. But basically, I took the part of the stamp that you would normally stamp, and that's on the door of my Misty right now. Or was when I was doing the colored part of the stamping. And now I took the same animal stamps, I lined them up, and I'm stamping the like normal outline on top of the backs of the stamps. I hope this technique was somewhat clear. I know I wasn't like doing a perfect job describing it there, but I do have other videos with the same technique, and this is a pretty common technique. I'm sure you've seen it, where you stamp with the back, and stamp with the front of the stamp. And I think some people call it like highlight stamping. I don't know if there's a technical term for it. But anyway, I'm going to keep stamping the animals on there until they get a nice impression. And I was finding that they weren't turning out great, and I had to stamp a few times, but I think that was more to do with the fact that my arms were sore from rock climbing and I wasn't putting good pressure on it. So I also used the brayer, which is that like rolling pin sort of thing, and you can use that to put some pressure on your MISTI if you have like arthritis or whatever reason your arms are sore or hands are sore. So just a suggestion, maybe trying that brayer on top of the MISTI. Then the elephant still was not turning out perfect. He was like still splotchy. So I took a little, like, it's like almost like it has this Q-tip material on top of it, but I took this little tool and dipped it in my ink and then filled in, it's a Fantastic, that's the name of it, a Fantastic, and I dipped it in the orange ink and then I filled in the splotches of the elephant. But you could do the same thing with one of those little like finger daubers or makeup sponge or something and dip it in the same ink that you stamped with and fill in the little gap areas if you're trying a technique like this. It's still not going to be perfect solid stamping because, again, you're not stamping with the right side of the stamp. But I think it's a fun look. And I added the blue for the words, and then I'm going to put it on some purple cardstock to complete the rainbow. Because here you have the pink, orange, green, blue for the words, and then purple would complete that rainbow. And I do know that the card kit kind of like suggested that rainbow by including the 4 colors of ink and then 2 different colors of cardstock, so like you had the full rainbow in that too. But I never figured out how to get all that on the card before I was basically like done with the kit. So I put that on a card base, and here's what I have left of the kit. Quite a bit of pattern paper still, those white tags that I don't know how to use, and some blue cardstock. But I've used my critter stamp set pretty heavily. I've used my ink a few times, and you're going to have those forever, which is awesome and adds to the value of the kit, in my opinion. So that is it for my video today. I hope you found this helpful. If you have the card kit, or if you can use some other critter stamps in your stash to create some similar cards. If you're a big fan of the mini ink cubes, you can do that ink swiping thing with any of them. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm going to continue to do more of these like kit videos where I make a bunch of cards, and 6x6 pad videos where I make a whole bunch of cards, because I think that those have been really helpful to people. But, you know, always feel free to leave suggestions in the comments. I will link up to some of the products that are used, even though the kit is sold out. You can buy some bits separately in the video description, as well as my blog post where you can see all the cards, and you can find out about the places that I donate the cards to. So, thank you so much for watching and for sticking through this long video. I hope you found it helpful and inspiring. Have an awesome day. Bye.